Hello everyone and welcome back to Football Manager 2019 and the second part of this experiment where we're seeing what would happen if Newcastle had Sheikh Khalid bin Zayed Al Nahyan in charge of the club as chairman. He is the man rumoured to be making a takeover bid of the club. He's a cousin of Manchester City's owner, if I remember correctly, and he is just, well, not quite as, but almost as minted as he is. So we're expecting a huge amount of money coming into the club, although that certainly will not happen because this is Newcastle United and nothing good ever happens to this club. But we're going to see what Football Manager thinks would happen if he were to take over the club. Now, if you watched the last part, go and watch it if you didn't. If you did watch it, you'll know that the first run of this experiment went really badly, or, about as well as you would expect it to, with Newcastle getting promoted and relegated about 10 seasons in a row, and then the owner giving up and leaving without having achieved anything at all. We're hoping that doesn't happen this time around. And if we have a quick look at the competition screen, nothing has happened for quite some time at Newcastle United. We did win the Carabao Cup in 2020 though, in this experiment. So that was one real quick, immediate positive that came to the club. That happened at the end of last season. A good run through the cup competitions, beating Spurs, Wolves and Brighton on the way, Morecambe as well, probably not as big a fish, but then beat Chelsea 1-0 in the final, Matt Ritchie with a second minute winner, and then holding out for 88 further minutes, a good portion of the match actually against 11 men, only the last half an hour against 10, and they managed to win their first piece of silverware for about 50-60 years now. So it was a really big result. The end of the season not that great, but overall they did quite well and finished up in 8th place in the league. So today what we're going to do is go forward 5 years into the future and then possibly another 5 years. We're going to see how the team have done, who they've been signing, where the money's been going. Last time off, you can see that they did spend 39 million in the first season, very little going out of the club. But the year after that, they had a good 105 million pounds come into the team. Everton Ribeiro, the really big transfer signing, Batshuayi, Chamberlain, Monreal, all big names. Divock Origi in on loan, Diego Dallo in on loan. Players leaving the club, the kind of players you would expect to leave the club if we had a billionaire owner. And then Divock Origi has been signed on a permanent deal for £18 million, so he's going to lead Newcastle into a bright future. Now, if you haven't subscribed to the channel already, make sure you do hit that subscribe button. There will almost certainly be another part to this experiment, probably just the one, and then we'll move on to a brand new experiment. So if you have ideas for experiments, let me know in the comments, and make sure to drop a like on the video if you are enjoying this series. But now let's go forward 5 years into the future and see how Newcastle get on. Well, we are now 5 years ahead. The way this will work is I will take us slowly through the various fixtures, then we'll have a look at their transfers, how they've done in the league, and any other general information that may have gone on in the club, and then we might do that again in 5 years' time. But starting off with the season where we left off last time, you can see the Europa League qualifying went pretty well, beating Siroki Brzeziec, Dinamo Brest and Rijeka. I have no idea how you pronounce that. I think it's Rijeka. In the qualifying rounds to get into the group stage. The league getting off to a decent start. Win over Man United, 1-0. Danilo, of all people, with the goal. 1-1 against Palace, 3-2 against Fulham. A good start to the season before losing to Liverpool, then beating Spurs 2-1. So a very strong start to the season. Also beat Spurs in the Carabao Cup. Did well in the group, beating Anderlecht, Lech, losing to Marseille again, beating Lech, and also drawing with Anderlecht. So 10 points in the group, probably enough to qualify. 10 points usually the cut-off for a safe route through. Marseille probably winning that group as well. Did get through in the Carabao Cup, looking to defend that. Also beat Cardiff 1-0 to get them into the semi-finals. They lost the first leg 2-1 to Brighton though, then lost to Arsenal, beat Palace, lost to Fulham, and then lost to Brighton again. So knocked out by Brighton of all teams, 4-2 in the semi-finals, which is a bit unfortunate. But they carried on going in the FA Cup, beat them 2-0 by Red Bull Leipzig at home, 2 goals in 3 minutes there. Not setting them up well, and then they did win 1-0 in the return leg, Divock Origi with a goal, but it just wasn't enough at that point. Still going in the FA Cup though, beating Fulham 2-1, and then beaten by Swansea in the FA Cup quarter-finals. Ben Brereton getting a hat-trick here. Got to check that profile out. Was at Newcastle, so they signed him out of revenge as much as anything from what I can tell. But that meant it was a disappointing end to the season. Not a lot happened. I think they finished around 8th that year. Not sure what just happened. Let's sort that back by date order, shall we? The year after that, Carabao Cup went terribly. League doing alright. A lot of wins in there, some defeats, but doing generally well. Knocked out by Wolves in the Premier League. We'll have a look at the final league positions in a minute. We just want to see if they've won any cup competitions, because it's very unlikely they win the Premier League unless we see a huge streak of green, which we're not here. Very traffic lighty, this form. But back in the Europa League, managed to get through this group stage pretty comfortably, winning all 6 matches. Rijeka in there again, Besiktas and Hapoel Beersheva in there as well. Also beating Wolves in the FA Cup, then Luton in the 4th round, beat Nice 2-0 in the Europa League first knockout stage, Jadon Sancho and Everton with the goals, and then 4-1 in the return match, absolutely destroying them even with 10 men to get themselves into the last 16, through to the quarterfinals of the FA Cup as well with a 4-0 win over Peterborough. Then beat Augsburg 2-0. Ibe and Origi, 2 former Liverpool players doing the job. 2-2 draw away from home made sure they got through. They managed to score in the 39th and 71st minute. So that put them into the quarterfinals. They lost 3 games in a row here after losing to Liverpool in the quarterfinals of the FA Cup. But then drew Juventus of all teams. A 1-1 draw at St James's Park would have been a cracker of an atmosphere, but then lost 1-0. Davide Rossi with the goal for Juventus. A really strong league season though, and that takes us pretty much, we've got 2 more years left to go, but you can see they did not qualify for Europe in that league season. So back to the domestic competitions, which didn't really go that well. A lot of defeats here, but kept going in the Carabao Cup till Arsenal put a stop to their run. They did beat the Scum 3-0 though. Divock Origi, Everton and Almiron with the goals there. FA Cup run doing alright, beating Luton and Birmingham after a replay. And then Middlesbrough as well, so beating both their lower league rivals this season in the cup competitions. FA Cup quarter-final win over Crystal Palace. They're into the semi-finals of the FA Cup, and they've beaten Manchester United as well. An 89th minute Divock Origi winner. He loves the big game, he loves the last minute goal, and he has sunk Manchester United in front of 90,000 people at Wembley. And Newcastle are in their first FA Cup final since the early 2000s. They then lost 4 league games in a row, not helpful. 5 league games in a row, including to United. But in the final, they lost on penalties. Oh, that's an absolute sucker punch. Everton Ribeiro scored twice. They were playing 10 men for almost the entire game as well, but Raheem Sterling got the equaliser. And you can see Sandro Tonali missing the last penalty. So no FA Cup win this season. But their league form doing very well in this start, but then they hit a really rough patch where I assume a manager will have lost his job. FA Cup run, they want to try and make another final, but it's stopped by Everton. A pretty nothing season, I think it's fair to say. Now, if we look at the league table over the last 5 years, you might notice a little bit of a pattern appearing. So, when we left off before, they had finished in 8th place. The season after that, they dropped down to 11th, not the best year. Well clear of safety. Although, actually, they're only 4 points above the 40, so not that safe. Then they jumped up to 5th place, but still 13 points off the Champions League places. 8th place after that, still a little bit off the Champions League pace. 8th place after that, and 8th place after that. So they found their league position, but you can see here that was about 13 points off, and then there were 10 points off European football, and in the most recent season there were 11 points away from European football, or actually not that far, 8 points away, because Everton qualified as well. But still some distance from the Champions League places, and that's the real issue for them. How are they going to make up that gap? Because if we look at their transfer history, they have been pretty, let's say, sort of carefree with their money. Now you can see £116 million spent the season they signed Everton Ribeiro, Christopher Schindler coming in, Danny Rose signed as well. That was a big season. Andre Gomez coming in as well. A lot of good names coming in. 47 million going out of the club. The following season, 107 million spent. Danilo, the big signing, Joel Matip, and Divock Origi from Liverpool, Weigl and Santon coming back to the team, 31 million going out. Then 117 million spent. You can see Jadon Sancho for 44 million, the biggest signing. Nicolas Otamendi in there as well for 24.5, and Nemanja Matic, Thiago Maia, Ross Barkley. These are big names coming into the team, but at this stage in the game, a little bit past their prime, some of them. Not Jadon Sancho, obviously. And then the next season, Nathan Ake and Paul Lopez, a big signing. Dwight McNeil for 37.5 million. Seems like a lot of money. I'm going to say that now. And you can see they took a huge loss on him in 2 years. Not playing a lot of football. Never had a good average rating. Absolute money down the pan. You do see a lot of that with these big clubs when they spend a lot of cash. Or, clubs trying to become big clubs, spending a lot of cash. But 61 million going out of the club. This is a huge net spend, which I assume is going to hit them financially. Now they've gone out and spent £173 million on Sandro Tonali. He is worth 82 million. He's retained some value. He does look like a top quality player. That is an absolute impact signing, and you can see the impact that it had. 2 brilliant seasons with him. Signed for Chelsea for 32.5, broke into the first team and did really well for a couple of seasons, but £173 million spent, 250 million that year. Jason Denayer also coming in. Jordan Henderson being signed from Barcelona for 12.5 million, and 119 million going out the door to make it up, including Jadon Sancho in what looks a bit like a swap deal to me, in all but name. You can see he had one brilliant season at Newcastle and then moved to Chelsea, where he seems to be doing all right. I'm not sure he's quite as good as Sandro Tonali on that evidence. But DeAndre Yedlin going for nearly 20 million as well. The year after that, £315 million spent. Paqueta, the big signing, coming in from Milan, where he was doing quite well, getting very nice high average rating. He's not been prolific for Newcastle, but he is a consistent performer. Jorge Mere in from Atletico Madrid. He's another very consistent performer, only just signed for the club. He's going to have his first season next time out. That's a big addition to the team. Paslak coming in for 51 million. That's a very good bit of business as well. Another very consistent performer. His price going up every year. Borussia Dortmund, Barcelona, PSG and Newcastle, year after year after year. You would not expect to see that on many players' rap sheets. But you can see huge amounts of money being spent out and quite well invested, I think. Now, they are getting to that point. Pineda's a very good player, in my experience, doing very well at Cruz Azul, but hasn't done that well breaking into Newcastle. But a lot of money going out of the team again. You can see 30 million to Origi, 30 million from Lascelles, just 20 million from Almiron. You would have thought of a bit more cash there. Henderson's gone to Leicester straight away, didn't stick around for very long. But you can see Almiron here had a good little time, but he wasn't as consistent as his early seasons and was then sold. So it's an interesting one. I'm pretty sure they're going to have failed financial fair play at some point. You can see they did in 2021, but they haven't since. And they have upgraded their facilities as well, their youth category up to grade 1 as well. So very interesting the way that's worked out. A quick look at their team by value. You can see Tonali, the big name. Everton has had a great time. I don't know if this is Everton Ribeiro. It's Everton either way. But you can see he's had a fantastic impact since joining the club. He's got to be worth a lot of money these days. Paqueta, Mere, Regilio, I'm not familiar with him. He's a regen, that would be why. But he's done well. Look at that. 12 and 11 in 26 games each year. That's not bad for £16 million on a striker. Matvienko, he plays as a left back. Again, pretty consistent. They are doing this. They're building up a good squad that's not too big over time, and it's worth a decent amount of cash now. I think they're just about there. They might need a few more big names coming in over this summer, but I think they're nearly there. They could well be knocking on the door of the Champions League very soon. So let's go forward 5 more years, run through it a little bit faster than we just did, and spend a little bit more time maybe looking at the transfers and at the squad. So let's just jump forward one more time. So when left off last time, this is where they were. Still no European football, but they were going in the Carabao Cup, making it through to the quarterfinals when they were beaten by Everton. A good league season on the looks of it. They did beat Chelsea in the FA Cup 2-1. They've got Lukaku in the team now. Beat Huddersfield and then beat Sheffield United for another FA Cup semi-final. And they beat Everton on penalties as well. So they're into their second FA Cup final in a very short period of time. But can they get the win this time? It was a strong end to the season, and they lost to Watford of all teams 2-0 in the FA Cup final, absolutely choking at the last there. They did also finish 8th in that league season, so no European football again. You can see this season really not doing well. Cup run ending with Fulham in the FA Cup and Hull in the Carabao Cup, and just a lot of defeats. Not even a recovery at the end, it's just a poor season. They finished in 10th that year, so that's reflected in how badly they played. The year after that, doing well, getting through against Brighton, Wigan and Hull. They then beat Burnley on penalties in the Carabao Cup quarter-final and managed to overcome Arsenal 3-2 in the first leg with 10 men, an 87th minute James Hill winner, and then 3-2 in the return leg, kept their players on the pitch, and Arsenal just couldn't cope. So into another Carabao Cup final. And in the Carabao Cup final, they went out to Southampton in the FA Cup 4th round, but in the final they beat Manchester United yet again on penalties this time. 3 penalties missed by United, pretty much guarantees the win for Newcastle here. They were 2-0 up in the 48th minute, but then went back to 2-2 in a 5-minute spell shortly afterwards. But their league form doing alright, good strong finish to the season, and they actually finished 7th that year. But they did, through the Carabao Cup, also qualify for Europe, getting past Olympia, Basel and Apple. That's a difficult little preliminary qualifier run there. They beat Augsburg, Espanyol, drew with Zenit, and then finished off with 3 further wins. So unbeaten in their group stage, and only dropping 2 points to Zenit. Not too bad. Carabao Cup, they made the quarter-finals of that competition, beating Spurs 3-0, a strong result against 10 men. Lost the first leg, though, at home to Manchester United. Vinicius Jr. with the goal, Oliver Neacham sent off. In the return leg, beaten 2-1 as well. Rashford and Chong with the goals, so not doing too well in the Carabao Cup. 3-2 defeat in the first leg here in the Europa League first knockout round. Morton and Rogelio with the goals, but Diakabe getting the winner. But then 3-1 at home. Paqueta paying back a big chunk of his transfer bill, got them through to the next round where they were beaten by Torino 2-1 at home. And in the return leg, a 1-1 draw with 2 men sent off. They still had a 1-0 lead there. They would have needed another goal away from home though. And were knocked out of the Europa League. Made it to the FA Cup semi-final, but beaten by Spurs. So a bit of a disappointing season, but a couple of good cup runs. And they did finish 7th that year. So in the most recent season, they did somehow qualify for the Champions League. If I missed something in this season here, Carabao Cup quarter-final, no, they must have done it through the league. 7th place finish, or was it a 6th place finish, getting them into the Europa League again, where they did go through against Dunstreda, Dundee and Apple again. Another good group stage campaign, dropping just 1 point. Running through in the FA Cup after being beaten by City in the Carabao Cup. Did manage to get through again, the same thing, 3-2 defeat followed by a 3-1 win, getting them through against Hamburger SV. And then 2-0 against Arsenal away from home, their defeat there. But a 3-1 win was not enough. This 40th minute goal from Klepacki knocking them out of the competition on away goals, which is a bit disappointing. Still going to the FA Cup though, having another crack at that, but then beaten at the semi-final stage again here, beaten by Chelsea this time, 3-2, the damage done. Well, actually, they were 2-0 up, and then 3 goals in 13 minutes in the first half turned it around, including Jadon Sancho for Chelsea. So a disappointing little run for them. If we have a quick look at the league table and just see where they finished up over the last few seasons, you can see they got an 8th place finish there, good way off the Champions League. 10th place finish, closer to the Champions League on points. Then 7th place, 2 points off the Champions League. One more win that season, they'd have been in the Champions League for the first time. And then about 7 points off. and most recently they finished again 7 points off in 6th place. So this all a little bit frustrating that they've not managed to make that extra step yet, but they are certainly closer than the last time we looked. If we just run through their transfers a little bit quickly, because this video is dragging on a little bit now, you can see £391 million spent on players. Miguel Mere, Eric Dyer for 63 million, Bakayoko, Romelu Lukaku for 35, David Neres for 30, Ricardo Rodriguez, big name players. Akeem Samuel, I don't know who that is, gone out for 103 million. He was signed for 13 million from Charlton and then sold on for a massive profit. That was a good bit of business by them there. George Shaw and Onana going out to Naya as well. You can pause the screen at any point if you want to look at these in a bit more detail. They did sign De Ligt though, and Ainsley Maitland-Niles. De Ligt, a huge signing for them from Manchester United, a good solid player in the game. Maitland-Niles looks like he's become a decent player as well, although not actually breaking that 7-point barrier, so that's a big amount of money for a not that consistent player. Kennedy being signed for 19 million. Obviously he was at loan in the most recent real life season, but Tonali leaving the club for £103 million to Manchester United. That's a big loss for a player that was so consistent. £70 million loss on him. The year after that, 115 million spent, but 165 going out of the club. David Neres and Ide Higginson there. Kennedy finally going 1 year after. Not an awful lot of transfer business to look at there. Starting to see, not recognise all the players appearing on here. You can see Højbjerg and Odegaard though, a couple of big names coming in. Wonder kids of the past. £210 million spent. The money getting a little bit erratic, I think. This is big amounts of money coming in and out every season, and unless you can keep these great players and build on them season after season, you're not going to make that next step. And you can see here, big name players leaving, Regilio leaving as well. So the squad's just getting a little bit fractured. I think it's a little bit bigger. Well, no, it's about the same size as last time, but the value has certainly dropped. There's not as much value in this team as the one we looked at 5 years ago, and that is a bit of a concern. Theo Morton, now their biggest player, he was signed for just 3.5 million from Charlton and is now doing pretty well across the team. So they're buying these young players and actually generating them quite well. Elliot Kilman, another player, central midfielder, signed for 43.5 million from Brighton. Pujamal, don't remember looking at him. He came in for 28 million, but not that great a player. Don't know why he's valued it so highly. Paslak, Antonio Jesus. So a decent team. They've got Diego Jota in there as well from Wolves. He's now 33. Been at Real Madrid for a long time. £25 million signing, but doing pretty well for them. Did a great job at Real Madrid, really. But I think that's probably going to be it for this episode. I'll show you the landmarks quickly. You can see, Sheikh Khalid bin Zayed Al Nahyan scaled down his funding in 2026 after they lost the FA Cup final. Twice runners-up. He's still got money going into the club. He's still a back-end sugar daddy. So that's not a big issue, but it does mean there's less money up front, which might be why we've seen some of these big players leaving the team. If we just have a quick look at the manager history as well, if you want to see this, you can see after a while quite a few of them did get sacked. Rafa went, Martinez went, Claude Puel went, Terim, Van Bommel, Emery was in there for a while, Frank de Boer, and now Inzaghi has been there for 3 and a bit years, having won the Carabao Cup in 2028. So he's doing alright, kept his job for now. But that will be it for today's episode. Do drop a like on the video if you've enjoyed it. Remember to subscribe and let me know in the comments if you'd like another part to this. But until next time, see ya.